everyone, this is me, obviously, and I am here to share something that is very near and dear to my heart and is a little work of love and community and storytelling that is one of my favorite decks to use. So let me just tell you really quick how this little deck came about and then grew and grew and grew. I teach classes that are Tales from the Woods. So they are a mix of picking a literature class, a small literature class, or a amped up book club. And then we mix in divination and we do projects together that is in some alignment with the theme of whatever book that we are reading at the time. I do these about twice a year is what I've been trying to do. And so last year we did a Tales class reading The Highland Witch by Susan Fletcher. Now I had listened to this on Audible, and as soon as I finished listening to it, I turned around and started listening to it again. And I had a Tales coming up in the fall because I'm trying to do it in the spring and one in the fall. And I had one coming up, and I don't even know when this one was. Me and dates don't go together. But anyways, I had it coming up and I was like, that's the book that we're going to do the class on. So then I started rereading it again for the purpose of, page numbering and coming up with themes and all of that kind of stuff. And as soon as I did, and I don't think either one of these are the herbs, I have a sheet that shows what it looked like as I was coming up with this deck. But as I started, I think I actually started listening to it and reading it again to prep for the class. And I started getting these keywords. I'm like, that could be an oracle card. That could be an oracle card. That could be an oracle card. And I knew that we would have a project, that we would want to do. And so I thought, oh, okay, this is going to be my project because I like to do the projects too. And so I started to list out, the cards as they came to me. I started to list out the cards and start to build a 36 card core. And that's where it started. So before class started, I had a 36 card deck that I was able to test out and use. I really loved it. And then as we got into class, myself and a couple other people started tracking all of the plants that were in the book. And I thought, okay, well, we can add on a set of plants because it's very oriented around plants and herb crafts. And then I think near the end of the class, and several people in the class had ordered copies of it because I made it available so that they could order it. And then it was like, okay, I guess we could add some animals in. I think Deb had said, what about the animals? And I did an animal expansion, mostly with animals in the book. Animals aren't as prevalent as plants are in the book, and then added in the animals, and same thing with the plants. There were plants added in that I needed to have in a plant expansion, and then there were animals that I needed to have in a plant animal expansion for anything I would use. So not strictly to the book. Then really none of some of the ideas are straight from the book, but many of them just kind of started to roll from there on the core. So when that class ended, I had a core 36 cards, which are represented up here, and I had an expansion of animal cards, which I didn't want everything to just be repetitive. So this is really about characteristics. They ask you the question, what should you be in this situation? So be a nurturer, be curious. We're going to talk about that, but they're characteristics. Whereas the plants are split up into the elements and have their own keywords as well. So I had a 36 card core, and I had a animal characteristics expansion, and I had a plant expansion, elemental plant expansion, elemental qualities. Now, I had in the 36 an animal card and a plant card. If you have my Journey Oracle, you know that I like that format because then I can pull from an animal deck or a plant deck if I want more information, but then I don't have to have the animals or the plants take over the whole deck, so that you're getting readings where you have all of the cards are plants or all of the cards are animals. I don't really work with plants and animals in that as much in that way, so it makes more sense to the way that I function to do a reading, and then if these cards come up, then I can pull from either one. Now, I played with putting them all in, but again, for me personally, I don't particularly love for this much of a suit to just sort of take over, but then you also want a decent number of plants or animals to be able to pull from. So this works really well for me because I have my core cards. If I get plant or animal, I can pull a plant or an animal from here, or I can pull it from another plant or animal deck that I have, which I do also. So that was the core when we left. Fast forward to this last, not the class I'm teaching right now, but the last class that I taught is a working with Oracle class, in which we talked about how to work with Oracle versus Tarot, but also more importantly, we were kind of showing how to really understand how the different types of oracles work so that you're utilizing the right oracle for the right thing, and then also identifying where you might see space for you to make your own oracle for yourself to use. And so I use this deck as an example of that, how to do that, but then also added an ancestor, because what I started to do, and I might have the pages here, I can't remember if I ripped them out to then work on, which is possible. Here. So I started to actually make an oracle deck over here, a fresh one for the class, based on the 3 realms, which is how I tend to vision the world, right? So the 3 realms, the 3 aspects of the tree, the 3 cauldrons, these are all primary parts for me of seeing how the greater world works. So I started to make a deck to be able to make up during the course of the class, and I realized that much of it was already in my core oracle of place, because this was meant to be reflective of my way of seeing the world, my way of practicing. And so then I sort of said, okay, let me see what's already in the deck that I have, which was a lot, and then take the ancestor part, which is what I really wanted to add in the realms and the cauldrons, and add those into this to kind of fulfill this deck. And so this now has that sense of feeling complete, and I absolutely love working with this deck. So I added in the ancestor guardian cards and some the realms and the 3 cauldrons, and it's like, okay, now I have this perfect core for me. Again, when you make your own deck, you make it perfect for you. And I do have the, again, animal characteristics to emulate expansion to draw from, and then the elemental aspects of plants to draw from should I so need those. So that is how this kind of started and came about. If you haven't read The Highland Witch, you can also see this under the title Korag. There's another title as well that you can find it under. I highly recommend it. The Audible book version is wonderful, and the print versions are wonderful, obviously, as well. So I'm going to read you just the beginning of what I have in the little handout here. And because I think it just best explains why this deep dive, because I truly believe, and I think you could ask anybody who took that class, that we all really went on a journey, not just with this book, not just with a deck or whatever other projects other people did, but with Korag herself. Like, we all just took a journey together, and I do think that it certainly changed me, or I would almost say it empowered me to be more fully stepped into who I am. And I like to think that really a lot of the people who took the class, if not all, came away a little bit changed from their experience with Korag. This oracle deck was inspired by and born out of the book The Highland Witch by Susan Fletcher, originally published under the title Korag and also published under Witchlight. The book in turn was inspired by the true story of the massacre of the MacDonalds in the Highlands of Scotland in 1692 and the woman who did what she could to save them and generations of men following the massacre. You do not need to have read this particular book in order to use this deck. The folklore surrounding Korag exists in Glencoe, Scotland, as a tiny woman, healer, witch, human being willing to risk self to warn the MacDonalds that soldiers they had been sheltering were going to rise up and slaughter them all. Hunted her whole life for the word witch, she could have chosen to stay out of the affairs of men, but instead she chose to act, and because of that choice, many men, women, and children were saved. It is said that she threw the MacDonald sword into Loch Leven and placed a spell that as long as it remained in the lake, the men of Glencoe would not die in battle. Many of the themes of the book and the story of Korag are shown in this oracle. The understanding of self, the power of words, the power of story, the desire to find a place in this world to freely be who we are, the power of choice, the power of love, and the existence of beauty in a sometimes brutal and cruel world. There is an understanding in these themes that we create monsters with the words we use as individuals and societies, that we can allow others to define us or we can choose to define ourselves, that humans have a need for a foe, an adversary, a monster, and if there is not one handy, we will make one from those that are different from ourselves. There is light and shadow found here in all the things, power in witch and danger in witch, treachery and darkness and peace to be found there, ridicule from people as well as love and support and kindness. We must all face the shadow so that we can fully realize the light. And that, I think, best as I can describes the place that this oracle of place came out of. So you can see that I have my lovely piles that some people love when doing a walkthrough and some people don't. But in this case, I do think it's important. Now, I had written a larger guidebook, but a lot of that is based on page numbers. Concepts can be found in the book, quotes directly from the book. Those are not things that obviously I can put up for sale as the book is not my work, right? So, but I do have a little sheet that gives keywords for all of the cards. And this kind of has the core cards, which are these core cards, and then the ancestor expansion, because some people use these in different ways. I have, people from 2 different classes. I have, printed out the deck for themselves and use the deck, and everybody uses it in different ways, so I wanted to kind of keep those separate. That was an add-on. And then the elemental plant expansion and the animal characteristics expansion. So these are in alphabetical order within their groupings. And then I also went and put them in order of their suits, because they really are, while nothing about these cards particularly shows that they're suited, they are suited in ways that I think are pretty easy to start to make those connections of as you're using it. And so what we see here are those things that are put out in their suits and what those are. And I really wanted to go through the cards in a more suited way. So the deck starts with the aspect of self cards. Now let's zoom in a little bit here. Let's look at these. So I really thought long and hard about whether or not I was going to on all of these are just and I threw the monster on the floor. That's what we think about the monster. All of these images are just made for free in the common domain images. There is, I did not draw any of these. This was needed to be done in a quick way. My life goal is someday to artistically paint or render this whole system, but you know, that is a life goal. Right now, I'm actually quite in love with it as it is because I've used it a ton. So I really went back and forth of whether to title this as Korag, whether to title this as Self, whether as to title this as Witch. I think it would do very well as Witch as well. Maybe I'll make that as an alternative card for people who don't want it to be Korag. I use a deck a lot called Deste, a system called Deste. I didn't realize this until I started to make the deck, but in many ways, Korag and the monster card, if you worked with that system, are very similar to Atart and Valid, right? You have the goddess of light and the goddess of darkness. But these are not really outside of self, is that darkness that is out in the world and the light that is out in the world, right? This is an oracle of place that really is rooted and grounded in ourselves and how we interact with the world. If I could do a deck a cartomancy deck that is the most like getting energy from a casting reading, that was one of my goals with this deck, to have it feel like a casting reading even though it's a cartomancy reading, and how energy is, what that energy is and how that energy is interacting is really important, and that's really tied and connected to us. So the Korag or the Witch, or just the self, or just the girl, or just the woman, or just the man, or just the boy, right? Really reflects that kind of highest self, that self that we're all struggling to attain, and sometimes we're there, and sometimes we for a moment we feel like we're in alignment with self, and then we can make choices and decisions or get pushed off of that to the left or to the right, but that's that sort of best version of self, when we are in alignment with ourselves, when we are connected to the world the way we need to be, when we are connected and have the boundaries and connections that we need in the outer world, that sense of that highest self. And the monster is really not so much about the monsters out in the world, although it can represent that, but it's more about the monsters that are within, right? This is really a lot more to do with a shadow aspect of things that we're pulling in, because it's with those shadows that we create the monsters out in the world, right? And so, but that starts in an inner space of humanity and then works its way in the outer space. So those are the two aspect of self cards. Then again, staying with that understanding and of self, we have the cycle of the life cycle cards. And so, of course, this starts with birth. We have that spark of new beginnings and everything is fresh and potential is there. We have childhood, where we're starting to push our boundaries. We're starting to become individuals and starting to explore what that means to be independent, but with that sort of security or not security, depending on the family circumstances, to be able to do so, and what kinds of parts of highest self that brings forward, and what parts of shadow that starts to make, right? We then have our adulthood, when we're supposed to be energy starting to settle down here a little bit. We're generally going to college or working or having children, or going about the business of living. We have old age, if we are lucky enough to get to this point where we are getting older, we're getting wiser. And again, these can be actual physical cycles, or they can be the cycle that we go through and we move in and out of. Sometimes we're younger and we're in an old age cycle. Sometimes we're older and we are in a youthful cycle, right? So it can be both sort of maiden, mother, crone, archetypal life cycle, or it can actually refer to actual stages that we're in with old age. Then, of course, comes death. It is inevitable in this world that we live in, and it is a doorway through to the other world. Now, I would also probably add in here, in the space of the other world, this would be the space between lives. This would be the Summerlands. This would be all kinds of places. This could be the afterlife for some people's way of seeing the world. This could be the between. For me, this would be between lives and also the Summerlands, and it can be both, right? And this could be also, again, connected the other world and the past lives, and the Fae, which we'll come back to later, are all liminal spaces, right? But it is also kind of part of that cycle, because we move into that before we then stay there and start to learn from that space and jump off the wheel, or we enter into the next life from there as well. So this is kind of a dual purpose, but the cycle here would be birth, childhood, adulthood, old age, and death. So we'll set that there. So we sort of centered in self, highest self, lowest self, the cycle of the self, and the way that that's constantly folding back on itself and moving forward, and or that how it is progressing physically in a way that is just what it is, and we just have to march along with it, right? So we center self, but then we also center out in this deck into the world. This is an oracle of place and finding that place for ourselves. And so we have some cards that connect us into the outer world, both in actual places and then in elements. So we'll talk about those next. And I know this is a very poor way of doing a walkthrough, but it works for this deck, and it should at least give you an idea of what's going on. So we have my place, that place that is ours, that place in which we feel safe and secure. And then we have the village card, which is the outer space where we connect with other people. This really pulls in that understanding. Again, subconsciously, I can really see my style of reading in this deck and what has worked for me. Again, when I think about Korag and the monster, when I think about the animals and the plant card, which is a system that I've put in place in my other deck, when I think about the My Place in the Village card, this is very similar to the understanding of private space versus public space that we see in Lenormand and Kipper and other systems like that. And so we have those cards. We have the mountain range, which can be a place of starkness and difficulty, but can also be a protective, especially if you have moors and big open spaces. When you get into the mountains, you're protected from the winds and a lot of things as well. For me, this speaks to endurance. This speaks to protection in many ways. We have a few water cards. We have the moving water of a river that we have to learn to let go of and flow down, versus resisting and banging ourselves all up against the rocks. We have the bogs where we can really get stuck in, but there's all kinds of amazing life in all of these different areas. But in terms of movement of water, this is where things can really get stagnant and stuck. We have lake water, which can be beautiful and cool. Now, I live on the Great Lakes and grew up on the Great Lakes, and so these are huge lakes that have violent storms washing them up and blowing them around, as well as we won't even start to sing the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, ships being wrecked in them. But when you think of these smaller lakes, they can still get stirred up by storms, but it's kind of that more clear water of a mountain lake that we see here. Now we also have islands, those little places of sanctuaries. I actually really love this card. These are actual islands in the area in which the massacre took place. And the first island, this larger island here, is a burial island for the McDonald's. And so that is an island in which, of course, people were buried, and that is when what they found, the bones of which they believed to be Korag's, or the Highland witch, then that her bones were moved here, and are laid to rest here. There is a little island to the right here that is an island for debates and disputes and being able to come together and work things out as a people. So that's pretty cool with those islands. Meadows are beautiful places full of life, but they're also places of wide open spaces in which you can be quite vulnerable. And then of course we have the natural plants and animals that we have already talked about. This is a page off of an old herbal book called Culpepper's English Physician and Complete Herbal that we have here. We have animals, and then we have the 4 elements of air, fire, water, and earth. I love those potatoes there. And so that's sort of the natural world and centering ourselves into the natural world, along with obviously the expansions of animals. So again, I didn't want the animals just to be random animals because I did have a system, and so I really needed them to have a purpose. And so for me, this is really about when we work with animal energy, it's often because we want to be like they are in some capacity, or they're calling us to be in a specific way. So for the cow, I have to be a nurturer. For the crow, be curious. And of course, there's lots of keywords you can put with these animals. These are just the starting point. Deer, be vulnerable. The dog, be loyal. The fox, be clever. The frog, be adaptable. The goat, be resourceful. The goose, be a traveler. The horse, be a partner. Mouse, be quick. Owl, be a hunter. Pig, be humble. Sorry folks, this is my deck and Wilbur is pig. Pigeon, be a messenger. Rabbit, be a watcher. Spider, be a weaver. Stag, be noble. Wolf, be devoted. Bear, be confident. Cat, be independent. Chicken, be ordered. And so those are just 20 animals. And again, you can, if you get the animal card or the plant card, you can pick from any of the lots of decks that you might have in those areas. I did the plants from elements, pull from various different sources. You can find all different elemental associations to plants, and there will be multiple ones for each plant. So I just picked one, and you can, I'm sure, find ways in which you say, no, that would be this. But in the course of this deck, this is where I've landed on. So we have bugle, which these first 5 are air. Bugle for breathe, dandelion for wishes, nightshade for cooling, peppermint for purification, periwinkle for memories, then moving into earth, comfrey for travel, fern for clear, horsetail for fertility, mugwort for strength, immunity, or privet for immunity, and then moving into fire, anemone for protection, cinnamon for cycles, cinquefoil for achievement, lovage for love, and peony for health. For water, we have blackberry for sacred, heather for luck, henbane for toxicity, water lily for shelter, and yarrow for courage. And again, because you can mix all these in, which I've done, again, I don't prefer those types of things to overtake the whole reading, so I tend to keep them separate in their own separate little bag and then pull them as I need to. So between those, that all represents that sort of settling into self and in our connection to place. These 3 piles here, naturally, because of the zoom in showing up here, are sort of aspect cards, and I have light aspect, neutral aspects, and shadow aspect cards. Now, as we'll see as we go along, I actually use reversals with this deck, so because everything can be light and shadow, and I feel like that plays very well with this deck, but for now, we'll just look at the light shadow, the light neutral and shadow aspects. So here we have the heart voice, and this is that still small voice inside of us that is our own self. It's the song of the self that we are trying to attune to, right? We have second sight. This is a gift, right, that we can have, and we can work on that gift and we can expand that gift, but there is a knowing that comes that is quite powerful when we listen to it. We have poultice, which is where we're actually utilizing our skills and our energy around us. We're doing the work. This is pulling together different herbs to make a particular fix or remedy for a situation. We have Weatherborn. This does come out of Susan Fletcher's book. The Weatherborn is the understanding that the season that you're born in, the weather that was there at the time of your birth, is very much a part of who you are, and is something that you can draw from. So this is something that you gain, you yourself, in that moment of birth. I'm a fall baby. It does inform who I am. The weather was cool. It was a little bit wet and a little bit rainy, and you can look up your weather and you can see where that sort of highest point of energy for you to thrive in because of where the weather when you were born. And then we have the beautiful morning star that we can sort of continually to set our sights on to navigate from. The neutral cards are words, and this is very powerful. Words can be used to uplift, and words can be used in extraordinarily destructive ways, so it's neutral. Our voice can be used to uplift and to teach and to inspire and to empower, and they can be used to tear down and to injure and to destroy as well. Darkness can be an amazing, I have a hard time seeing this one in shadow, but it is in shadow. Obviously, very scary things lurk in the darkness, as well as peace and calmness and serenity. And then the sword as well can be used to protect or to destroy. And so those are neutral aspect cards. And then in the shadow aspect cards, we have buried. Again, this can be, something that's unburied. We can bury things for good reason, or put them away and lay them to rest, or it can be things that are hidden and things that are secret. We have the barred windows. We can see through, which is lovely, but it's a difficult place to be in when we're just looking through windows. To wail is that moment of deepest pain, deepest fear, voicing the extreme ends of things. Now, this can be very powerful. We need to release those energies, but it does signify a great deal of pain being released. We have masks. Again, sometimes we wear masks to protect ourselves and to set boundaries, and sometimes not so much. We also have the shackled cards. We can use this metal ring to moor a boat so it doesn't get thrown out, but people can also be shackled to this. So again, all of the aspect cards can be seen in light and shadow. That's the whole point. But all together, they just make certain aspects that are useful to have in situations and in readings. So that is the original. So let me just zoom out here a little bit. That was the original core plus the expansions that were there. But again, when I was going to make another little deck, again for the purpose of showing how to make easily make a deck that is totally suited to you. Anybody can do it, right? I started to build a 3 realms, because the idea of the 3 realms, right? The sea, the land, and the sky. This is also the roots of the tree, the trunk of the tree, the branches of the tree, right? Where exist the cauldron of motion, warming, and wisdom. These all tie together with my sense of worldview. If you work at all with like Celtic ideologies as well, you'll see that. Or again, a lot of people work with the roots of the tree, the trunk of the tree, and the branches of the tree. The sea realm down here is the underworld, right? This is the emotional and mental past. This is down in the depths where energy and emotions are shifting and changing, cauldron of motion, right? We have the land realm, which is the middle world. This is the physical. This is the present. This is where we sit with our backs against the tree, right? And this is where we stoke the fire of our health, of our emotional well-being that turns the realm of the cauldron of motion. And so we have the land realm. And then we have the sky realm, which is the upper world. This is where we're getting guidance and spiritual wisdoms that can be poured down and caught in the other cauldrons if we have them upright, right? So we think about the upper world, the middle world, the lower world, the branches of the tree, the trunk of the tree, the roots of the tree, the sea, the land, the sky. So this really comes into the way the greater world, because the land that we've talked about so far is the land that we're interacting with energetically and in archetypes as well, but also directly, where these are looking spreading out into the other realms and widening the scope of energy and then how energy is moving and shifting amongst itself. So those were important cards for me to add into my perfect deck, as we're always trying to make when we're making a deck. We do have a couple sort of what I would say are almost random cards, but they needed to be there. And these are liminal spaces. We talked about the other world, the between world. This can also be the afterlife, but we have that there. But also past lives, because we're having energy that's coming forward from past lives, patterns that are playing out. We can see patterns that play out in our own lifetime. We understand that there are ancestral patterns in our family that we see playing out, but we also then, if we believe in past lives, understand that those patterns are also crossing past lives, and that there's a lot of blurring of the lines between ancestral and past life energy. You could in a past life been in a lifetime with some of your ancestors as well, which is quite powerful, but we're not going to deep dive there. And then of course the Fae are important, liminal spaces and energies that interact and shift between our world, the liminal space, and their world and the other world. And so that's a shifting energy and a very old and primal energy that in my worldview needs to be expressed in the cards. We'll get to the ancestors, I guess, last. But in the scope of that crossing between liminal spaces, Fae, past lives, ancestors, if you work with guardian energy, there's a card that's just the guardian. For me, this is that some of us have a primary guardian. This can be a familial guardian who passes down through family lines, which is where my primary ancestral guardian comes from, but it can also be in the energy of an animal guardian as well. I had to, of course, have mine, but these reflect the bear as water guardian. Again, it's not a fish, but it's water guardian. Wolf as land guardian and crow as air. So these could just be representative of those arenas for you and guardians, or you could pull different animals from the animals, or you could just take this out and just use the guardian card to be ubiquitous for whatever guardian energy is stepping forward. This is just, again, my perfect deck, and my perfect deck has all those guardians in place. So then, of course, primarily my practice has become that, my personal practice has become very centered around my connection with my ancestors. So I really wanted to include that into the mix. So I work, there's, many ways to break down your ancestral energy. I work with ancestor of blood. Is my blood ancestry, what I inherit through my blood and my DNA. Ancestors of land, the land that I was born born on, the land that I live on. Those can be different places for different people, but we inherit the stories of the land that we were born on or the land that we walk on, and it's important to know and honor those. And then ancestors of inspiration. These are the ancestors that we choose, right? We choose them. They are the family that chose us and we chose them. Friends that have passed on, grandparents from adopted families that have chosen us, people that have inspired us that we've never met, poets and authors and artists and musicians and whosoever else, activists, anybody who has inspired you, that has passed on that you chose. They aren't part of your bloodline, but they are people that you want to honor and that have made an impact on who you are. We have different levels in many ways, and how I work with ancestors does change depending on the level. This isn't an ancestor class. I do have an ancestor workshop if you want to see how I really think and feel and work with this type of energies. But we have the ancestors that are named. These are ancestors that we know their names. We knew them in real life, or we could have in some way. Grandparents, parents, siblings, nieces, nephews, great aunts, great grandmothers, people that we could have known or did know but have passed over. They tend to still be in the processing of working through their own liminal space things, but they often do function as guardians depending on your relationship. Unnamed ancestors are in that sort of liminal space. This is going back far enough in your ancestry. You know that they exist. You can say, oh, that, my great, 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 great grandparent, and they kind of maybe know vaguely where they lived, but you don't know their name, and that they're moving into either moving on with their lives or kind of shifting into guardian space depending on them. We have our primal ancestors. This is going way back, and this is a powerful source. My main guardian would come from that space. You might know a broad area range, going back to Norway or Sweden or England or, Australia, or wherever it is that like this deeper ancestor came from, but that's about it, right? Very powerful energy. It starts to meld into that ancestral energy that we all tap into as being all human beings. Then I have a sort of to represent the maternal, paternal, and then that what we're putting forward ourselves in our ancestral line. I have the grandmother and the grandfather. This can be divine feminine and divine masculine if you want to work with it that way. It sometimes shifts into that energy. This can be, again, if you're just working with a maternal line or paternal line. And then the legacy card represents what we are putting out into the world. I didn't want to call this children because we don't all put out as our legacy children. There are lots of different ways. I do like the dandelion blowing. I'm putting sort of our intentions and our energy out into the world in a lot of different ways. It may be children as well, but it's just what our legacy is and what we're leaving behind, what mark we're leaving on the world. So that is the ancestral sort of, hello, messiness outside of my desk. So that is all of the cards, right? So again, I tend to leave these these sets out separately. I just face them to each other because then it's really easy to be able to separate them out when I need to grab them. But I keep that in a separate little pouch. At the moment, I'm going to work with my Miss Deirdre of the bags to make a split bag for them, which I think would be really cool, but it's not on top of the priority list. Now, these are poker card size. I have them both in, let me get them out here. I have them printed both in This is one is fully mixed, but it doesn't have the new Ancestor cards, and I need to order a set of the Ancestor expansion in linen so that they can all, this is for like a mixed deck that's being used, but I'm obsessed right now with this plastic cardstock. And so this is the deck that I have out and that I'm using, but it can be printed in a linen cardstock or in a plastic. Miss Mindy, when we were all ordering decks during class, had got a set of plastic for Make Playing Cards, and I had never used the plastic in Make Playing Cards, and I really am obsessed with it because as a riffle shuffler. But the other reason is that, and I have done this actually, the other reason that I love the plastic is for being able to take it outside in all types of weather and not worry about it. And I have most definitely made use of that. We'll come back to that shuffling. And then I also have it on playing cards in sticker paper on the backs of playing cards as well, which I used for a very long time. So I am making this available for people, but I'm just doing it in the easy format that I have seen a couple other creators do on sort of these types of decks that you're not really going to go and do a whole pre-order and you know, order a bunch of decks and do all the shipping for it. But people have asked to have access to the deck. So you can purchase this deck from me for $10, and what you will get from that is a set of a PDF so that you can print it onto sticker paper, cut it out, and stick it onto either a playing card deck. You can get playing card decks with blank, you know, that has a back and then has blank fronts. You can get from Amazon. I give you links to things. You can get playing card stock that is blank on both sides. I really love this where you can see the history of cartomancy through on the other side, and I have shuffled the heck out of this, and it has held up really well. So you can just make it from home, print it onto cardstock, cut it up, print it onto sticker paper, stick it onto something, however you want to do that and print from home. But I also give you the files and the instruction to be able to print a copy for yourself, not to sell, to make playing cards. Anybody can do it. We had a lot of different tech levels in both classes that I teach, and with the instructions and the video how-to, it's super easy and everybody can do it. And then you can order a set for yourself from Make Playing Cards. That is going to cost you, a linen set is probably going to cost you about $25 US. A plastic cardstock like this is going to cost you closer to $30 for that. So there are a total of, oh my goodness, I should have written that down. There are a total of, let's see, there were 36 core cards, and then another 21 added on, so 57 core cards, and then there are 20 each, 20 elemental plants and 20 animal characteristics, so that would be 97 cards, if I'm doing the math right. I'll put it in the information in the description if I'm incorrect, because I am not a math person on the fly. Let me give these a good swirl. And again, this is just one of those things that I love this deck so much. I love working with it. I love reading with it. And I do have put pictures on Instagram, you know, when I've just done readings and people have asked about it. So I just got everything sort of cleared up, ready to go, links ready to go, so that, you know, if this is something that you want to just print and play with it yourself, or again, get a deck for yourself, you can. But I, you know, without going through the hassle and the work and the expense of making it into like a full-on deck with a, you know, full shipping it all and doing all that kind of stuff. That's a bit of a hassle. Whenever you're using reversals, and you don't have to use some, I've used both. I have done this without reversals and I've loved it, and I've done it with reversals and I've loved it. I like the first one to be a good wash spread like that, just to kind of get everything mixed up. I love how she showed up at the bottom after all that. That's pretty cool. Hello, highest self. I also have in just a little, again, this is not a guidebook. This is a keyword, again, I don't know what you would call it, a keyword guide. So I have obviously the introduction. I have the keyword connection here that just has the keywords for each of the cards. And then I have on the back of that, it sort of broke down into suits so that you can sort of lay them out as suits, think about them as suits, think about what those things mean to you, think about what you want to leave in, what you maybe want to take out. And then I have the a spread that I use the most with this deck. Really, I would say, I was going to say 99% of the time, but I wouldn't say that, because I also do 9 cards with it. So I would say 75% of the time this is the spread that I use, which is the Oracle of Praise spread. This is really great for cartomancy style spreads. So what I mean by that is this is really good for a 6 card. If you've learned like to do a 6 card with playing cards, if you've taken like my playing card class or something like that, where this energy is influencing this and the card to the right is influencing the card to the left. It's a style of reading. And so that's a great way, because what you end up with, this one is literally on top of this one, right? So what you end up with are 3 main cards. You have really 1 primary card, 3 sort of main cards, and then influences here. So if the main card here is the ancestor of inspiration, but it's being influenced by past life that maybe had some difficulty in that mental realm, in that really learning the lessons that had to have been learned. And so this is being this is influencing why this is part of the situation. Again, we don't have a question here. So I'm not really trying to read this, but to show that these cards form something that influence this card, which is being influenced by this, and so on and so forth. Again, this is not a teach a 6 card reading. I think I have a video on it because I know I had a handout for that reading at one point. So that's a great way to work with any kind of cartomancy style card or tarot card. It's a great spread. You can do a 9 card, obviously. 9 cards work great for anything. I have a whole video on the power of the 9 card reading. It is, I think, one of the most versatile readings that you can do, because you can see what's going on in the underspace, what's going on in the physical world, what's going on up in your headspace about a situation. You can do all the things that you do to Lenormand 9 cards, but it's just a very versatile spread for anything, but it's great with smaller decks like this because you've got the space for it. But then most of the time I just really love this Oracle of Place spread. Right, so I'll do an actual reading here for myself, which I always regret when I do that, because really personal stuff always comes up, because it's the nature of for reversals, I don't read reversals in tarot. I do use it in different oracle systems if it's part of the system. And again, I do use it for this. Like, for example, Deste uses reversals as part of its system, so I use it. The Cosmovisions Oracle uses it as part of a system, and so I use reversals with that deck. This deck, I wouldn't say you have to, and none of those decks you have to, but I will say it really opens up to really trying to understand the energy of the card. And it doesn't, I don't use the reversals, especially in this deck. So just speaking for this deck, I don't see that just because it's reversed that it's negative. negative. This deck is really kind of intuitive poppy for me, and so whatever that card in that situation feels like in reverse, sometimes it's a really great thing that it's reverse, and sometimes it's not a great thing that reverse. It just depends on the card and the situation. But we're going to just kind of do a general message here. So where I am now, we have buried. This is actually quite accurate. Again, being buried isn't a bad thing, although I think just feeling like that you have a lot on top of you can be the space. It can also be that you're sort of in a hibernation phase where you're just kind of getting by. You're doing, your body is functioning and doing what needs to be done as it's storing up resources to get through a particularly difficult time. There's a lot of ways that you can read this. I actually quite love this card. It shows up in a lot of different ways that are very helpful, and it makes a lot of sense in the readings. Where am I going? This is interesting because the sea realm, and again, I'm not going to get personal in this, even though this is a personal reading, but the sea realm is that under realm. It's the water. It's all of the emotions, right? What's interesting to me is that I've been in a space of really down in an emotional space for a while, and in some negative ways and some not negative ways, right? But I've definitely been down in the depths. And I see this as a coming up out of the depths. And that's something I think that is necessary and needed. It's also a breaking out because we have the buried and sort of being in that underground space, which again, there's some negative to that. And then there's some positive to that as well. So I don't really see either of these as being positive or negative. But as soon as I saw that, is that sense of, okay, let's rise up out of those depths. So how you read the reverse of each card and each situation, you just have to follow your instincts and trust what your message that comes through. And then the third card says, how can I get there, right? Now, if I just get the plant card by itself, you can choose. Now, this is the same with these are plastic and slippy. That's one of the downsides to plastic, but the upsides well outweigh, for me, the well outweigh the downsides of being a little bit slippy. So if you just read this as plants, this is like, okay, there's going to be something that you can physically get a hold of that is going to help you, that is going to bring about a cure, that is going to gain you something and release some good toxins in your body. I don't think that's a word, right? Good toxins, good things in your body to help you to get where you need to go. I can say right away, like I have been really working on getting moving. I've been doing a lot of boxing, and that's sort of a physical thing that has really been able to help me to start to feel like a coming up and out of that and sort of a regrounding into the physical. So you can just kind of go with the plant or the animal card by itself, and it reads really well. But if you wanted to, what you could do is take your plant part, or again, I have lots of plant and animal decks, and I will pull from whatever plant deck I am interested in at the moment. Let me just give these a good, and I don't really use reversals on these because it's just the plant giving me whatever piece I'm going to pull from it. And again, you can use whatever deck that you might have. So I pulling henbane. Now toxicity and water. So this is interesting because we're trying to come out of the water, but when I combine that with the understanding that this is going to help me, I'm really seeing this as doing things that are going to help me to release the toxins, aka again, as soon as I saw this, I thought, okay, yeah, I'm physically boxing, I'm physically moving myself, and just that exercise of I have had many, any of you that's done use like physical exertion when you're in a maybe difficult headspace. I get really emotional, like especially if it's like hard rock like going and you're just like pounding away and you're like releasing off. You can just literally feel stuff, emotional stuff seeping out of your pores, right? That's kind of that combination that I would get from seeing that particular combo. Let me make sure I don't mix in no, that's part of the, I just want to make sure I'm not mixing let's do this so I don't have to go fix it later. Okay, let me stick those over here. So we have our that plan. So, oh no, I should have left the henbane out. Oh well, you know what the card was. Oh, wait. Okay, see, nope, that's right. Pause. This is where you pause the video and pretend that didn't happen. No, this stuff happens to me all the time. Sometimes I have to pause the video to go watch the video and see what I just did. Okay, we got it sorted. So that's that sort of where I am, where I'm going, and how can I get there. Right now, what is it I need to know about how to get there? And then I pull a card for an aid on my path, something that's going to help me, and something that is going to block me. So I'm going to read this card in shadow. Whether it comes up, you know, reversed or not, I'm going to read it in shadow. So the Sky Realm is interesting because if last week, on Sundays when we do my plan with me, I pulled Air Spirit for my weekly card, and this has really been something I've been working a lot with this week is to create space for myself, to be able to be inspired, to work, create space for myself, to be just be able to take a breath and breathe. And so that makes is interesting because that's what I've been working with all week, and it is helping. And I think that sort of reinforces that message of what's going to help me in the moment. And then a blockage is the lake energy. So this is, you know, I love this type of card. You know, I love when you are using reversals and or you're just using a position, so you know, like a blockage position, or what's getting in my way, or what is tripping me up, or what is a secret that is going to cause a stumbling block, or whatever you might want to put as the shadow, or just the shadow. What's the shadow aspect of what's going on? I love getting positive cards in shadow places and negative shadowy cards in positive positions, because it really allows you to see that everything can be read in both directions. So for me, the lake is about calmness and stillness, and also about depth, right? Because I grew up on the Great Lakes, so I do think about lakes with depth. But I'm actually trying to climb up out of the lake, out of the depths, right? We're already talking about that in this reading. So I don't want to stay there. And stillness is just going to keep me where I've been. And that's okay. It's good to be still. It's good to be in the depths. But I have a personal pattern, right, of going into the depths in a good way, for hibernating, for healing, for gaining knowledge, but then staying there too long when I need to start to come back up, and then it becomes more of a shadow aspect of hiding away and retreating in a way that isn't healthy, right? So I always have a very fine line between when it's good for me to retreat and go into the depths and when it's time for me to come up. And since it's showing that it's time for me to come up and how to do that, having in shadow, just staying still and doing nothing is going to get in my way. It's really easy to stay when you're in that space because it's not all bad. It's kind of a bubble space. It's like a comfort space of being in the hibernation in the cave and just going to bed and sleeping, right? You think about that when you're in sort of that space where you just want to sleep. It's not that sleep is bad. It's not that having some, you know, days or a week or whatever, you're just going to be like, you know what, I am just going to hibernate and sort of refuel and recharge and do nothing. Those aren't negative things. But if it's time to move and you're just kind of, the call to staying in that quiet bubble space could be a real stumbling block for getting up and getting movement and getting yourself up into the next space that you might need to be in right now. So that's how I would read that message for myself. So I hope that you've enjoyed this look at this little deck that has really become quite close to my heart. Very important little project here that I love. And just seeing how you can put together something that is really in tune with who you are and how you see the world, I hope inspires you to go make your own little thing for yourself. Or if this is something that you want to play around with, the links in the description. It is available there for, again, you can print it for yourself or have a set printout out for yourself, either one. I hope that you enjoyed this and that you have a wonderful rest of your day.